The earliest memory I have of my mother is the scent of her lavender perfume. I was 4 years old when she died, but that fragrance still haunts me, especially on quiet nights when I'm alone in my room, trying to piece together the fragments of our brief time together. My name is Chloe, and this is the story of how I lost 2 families and found myself. I don't remember much from the weeks after Mom died. Most of my time was spent at my grandparents' house, a cozy 2-story home that would later play a crucial role in my life. Grandma Martha and Grandpa Joe tried their best to shield me from the pain, keeping me occupied with cookies and stories while Dad handled the funeral arrangements. 1 year passed in a blur of transitions between Dad's house and my grandparents'. I didn't realize it then, but looking back, I can see how Dad was gradually pulling away, spending less time with me and more time elsewhere. I'd hear snippets of adult worry, words like too soon and moving on, but I was too young to understand their significance. I was 5 when Dad brought home the news that would change everything. I remember sitting on our worn living room couch, my small legs barely reaching the edge, when he walked in with a woman I'd seen a few times before. She had long brown hair and a kind smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Chloe, honey," Dad said, his voice carrying a forced cheerfulness that even my young mind detected, "this is Linda. We got married last weekend, and she's going to be your new mom." I stared at Linda's stomach, which showed a noticeable bump under her flowered dress. Dad followed my gaze and added, "And you're going to have a baby sister soon. Isn't that exciting?" The word exciting hung in the air like a lead balloon. Linda stepped forward, her hands clasped in front of her. "I know this is a lot to take in, Chloe. But I promise we'll make it work." I remember nodding, not because I agreed, but because it seemed like the thing to do. I retreated to my room that night and pulled out the only photo I had of my mom showing her holding me as a baby, both of us laughing at something off camera. I touched her face gently, trying to remember the sound of her laugh. It was strange watching Dad transform into a different person. The man who used to spend weekends taking me to the park now spent his time painting the nursery and attending birthing classes with Linda. I tried not to mind, really, I did. After all, Linda wasn't unkind to me. She'd drive me to school in her blue Honda, ask about my day, and make sure I had everything I needed. But there was always something temporary about her attention, like she was babysitting rather than parenting. I'd catch her absent-mindedly rubbing her growing belly while I told her about my day at school, her eyes glazed with thoughts of her own baby. "Linda, can we get ice cream?" I asked one afternoon after school. "Not today, sweetie. I need to rest, the baby's been kicking all day," she replied, heading straight for the couch. It became a common response, "Not today, maybe later, another time." Then Emma arrived. I remember the day Dad brought them home from the hospital. He was carrying this tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket, his face glowing with a pride I'd never seen before, not even in the photos of him holding me as a baby. "Chloe, meet your baby sister, Emma," he announced, his voice soft with wonder. I stood on my tiptoes to peek at the red-faced infant. "Hi, Emma," I whispered, trying to sound like the responsible big sister I was supposed to be. That's when everything changed. Suddenly, there were new rules in the house, all revolving around Emma. "Chloe, please don't run in the house, Emma's sleeping." "Chloe, can you help fold these clothes while I feed Emma?" "Not so loud, honey. You'll upset your sister." I became a shadow in my own home, tiptoeing around, trying to make myself smaller, quieter, less noticeable. My responsibilities grew while my privileges shrank. I learned to clean bottles, fold tiny clothes, and tidy up toys that weren't mine. One day, I came home from school to find Dad and Linda cooing over Emma, who was playing with a brand new tablet designed for babies. "Look how smart she is," Linda exclaimed as Emma randomly hit the screen. "She's going to be a genius." I glanced down at my worn-out sneakers, remembering how Dad had said we couldn't afford new ones this month. But here was Emma, barely able to walk, with the latest educational gadgets scattered around her. The pattern continued. Emma got designer clothes from the mall while I got hand-me-downs from our cousins. She had a room full of the latest toys while I still treasured the stuffed bear my mom had given me, now missing an eye and patched in several places. It wasn't that they were cruel. They remembered to feed me, clothe me, send me to school. But it was always an afterthought, like checking off a box on a to-do list. The only time they seemed to really notice me was when Grandma and Grandpa visited. "Chloe needs new clothes," Grandma would point out, and suddenly Dad would remember to take me shopping. "Don't you think Chloe might like that new book series all the kids are reading?" Grandpa would suggest, and magically, the books would appear. I tried to be understanding. I really did. I kept my room clean, did my homework without being asked, and helped with Emma whenever they needed me. I thought if I was good enough, quiet enough, helpful enough, they'd remember I was their daughter too. When Emma started walking and talking, I thought things would get better. I imagined us becoming best friends, sharing secrets, and playing together like the sisters I saw on TV. I even decorated half of my room with welcome signs the day she was old enough to string full sentences together. "Want to play dolls with me, Emma?" I asked hopefully one afternoon. She looked at me with those calculating eyes that seemed too old for her 4-year-old face. "No, I want your dollhouse." "But that's mine. Grandma gave it to me for Christmas," I protested. Emma's response was to march straight to Dad and Linda, her face scrunching up in that familiar way that meant trouble for me. "Daddy, Chloe won't share her toys with me," she wailed, tears appearing on command. "Chloe," Dad's voice boomed from the kitchen. "Stop being selfish and let your sister play with your toys." That was just the beginning. Soon, Emma figured out she could take anything of mine she wanted. My art supplies, my books, even my clothes, nothing was off limits. When I tried to get them back, it always ended the same way. "Mom, Chloe's being mean again." "John, tell your daughter to stop bothering Emma." But the toy snatching was just the warm-up. Emma developed a talent for setting traps that would get me in trouble. Like the time she deliberately spilled juice on her new dress and told our parents I'd pushed her. Or when she broke her tablet and claimed I'd done it out of jealousy. Each time, I'd try to defend myself. "That's not what happened. She's lying." And each time, Dad would shake his head disapprovingly. "Stop trying to get attention, Chloe. Go to your room." My only refuge was at my grandparents' house. They saw through Emma's act and weren't afraid to say so. "John," Grandpa would say to Dad during Sunday dinners, his voice firm but tired, "you need to treat your daughters equally." "We do treat them equally," Linda would snap back. "But Chloe is just difficult. Always causing problems, always fighting with Emma. While Emma is such a sweet, well-behaved child." I'd sit there, pushing food around my plate, as Grandma's voice would rise. "Open your eyes. That sweet child of yours is manipulating everyone in this house. You're raising a little con artist, and you can't even see it." "Mother, please," Dad would try to intervene. "You're being unfair to Emma." "Unfair?" Grandpa would scoff. "What's unfair is watching you two spoil one child rotten while treating the other like she's invisible. That's what's unfair." But it was like talking to a wall. Dad and Linda had their narrative about their perfect younger daughter and their problematic older one, and nothing could shake it, not even the truth staring them in the face. Senior year should have been exciting, full of dreams about college and future plans. Instead, I found myself constantly worried about whether I'd even get to go. One night, as I was heading to the kitchen for a glass of water, I heard whispers that made me stop in my tracks. "John, it doesn't make sense." Linda's voice was hushed but intense. "The tuition money for Chloe, we could use it for Emma instead. Get her into that private high school she wants, and later, a better college." My heart stopped. They were talking about my college fund, the money Mom and Dad had started saving before I was even born. "I can't," Dad replied, his voice weak. "I promised Sarah. I promised her I'd make sure Chloe got an education." "Sarah's been dead for 14 years. Linda's whisper turned sharp. "You can't let promises to a dead woman control our lives forever." Emma deserves the best education we can give her. There was a long pause before Dad spoke again. My parents would disinherit me if I did that. You know how they are about Chloe. My legs felt weak. So that was it. The only reason Dad was keeping his promise to Mom was fear of losing his inheritance. Not love for me, not respect for Mom's memory, just money. Fine, Linda spat. But I think it's ridiculous we're spending so much on her when Emma could use it better. I slipped back to my room without the water, my throat too tight to swallow anyway. Graduation came and went. I got accepted to the local college's graphic design program, which meant I could live at home and save money. Grandma and Grandpa surprised me with a top-of-the-line laptop at my graduation party. "This is for all those A's you earned, sweetheart," Grandpa said, hugging me tight. "You'll need it for your design work." I was over the moon. Finally, I had professional-grade equipment for my studies. But my excitement was tempered by transportation concerns. The campus was across town, and I hoped Dad might let me use his old Honda now that he had a new car. "Dad?" I approached him one evening. "About getting to college." "We can't afford another car, Chloe," he cut me off before I could finish. "The tuition payments are already stretching us thin. You'll have to take the bus." I nodded, swallowing my disappointment. But just 2 days later, I overheard them in the living room. "I think the red Mercedes would be perfect for Emma's Sweet 16, Linda was saying. "She'll be learning to drive soon, and it's such a safe car for a new driver." "Isn't it a bit expensive?" Dad asked, but I could hear the smile in his voice. "Only the best for our little princess," Linda replied. "We can start saving now, she'll be 16 before we know it." I stood there, my bus pass clutched in my hand, thinking about the hour-long commute I'd be making each way while they planned to buy my 14-year-old sister a luxury car. 2 years into college, life had fallen into a predictable routine of classes, bus rides, and trying to stay invisible at home. Then came the phone call that changed everything. "Chloe?" Grandma's voice sounded strained. "Could you come visit us this weekend? Your grandfather's had a bit of trouble with his heart, and we need to talk to you about something important." That Saturday, I found myself sitting in their familiar living room, the same place where I'd found refuge so many times during my childhood. Grandpa looked pale, but was sitting up in his armchair, Grandma perched on the armrest beside him. They exchanged a look I couldn't quite read, then Grandma took a deep breath. "Chloe, dear, we need to tell you something. After your grandfather's heart attack, we've done a lot of thinking about the future. We're getting old, sweetheart," Grandpa continued. "And maintaining this house is becoming too much for us. We've decided to move to Pine Grove Nursing Home." The tears came before I could stop them. But. Now, Grandma moved to sit beside me, pulling me into a hug that smelled of her signature lavender perfume, so similar to Mom's. "We'll have excellent care there. And you can visit anytime you want." "I'll come every weekend," I promised through my tears. They both laughed, the sound warming the room. "You most certainly will not," Grandpa declared. "You're young. You should be out with friends, living your life, maybe meeting a nice boy." Then their faces grew serious again. Grandpa leaned forward in his chair. "There's something else we need to tell you. We've spent about half our savings on securing our place at Pine Grove. The rest will go to the family after we're gone." I started to protest that I didn't want to talk about this, but he held up his hand. "But the house," he continued, "we've already taken care of that. We've registered it in your name, Chloe. This house belongs to you now. It's all legal and official." My head spun. "Does Dad know?" Grandpa's face hardened slightly. "It's none of his business. This was our house to give, and we chose to give it to you." "But," I looked around at the familiar walls, the photos spanning generations, the corner where I used to hide during hide and seek. "Why?" "Because we're not blind," Grandma said softly. "And we want to make sure you're taken care of." I sat there, stunned, looking at these two people who had always been my strongest supporters, who had seen me when everyone else looked past me. "I won't tell them," I whispered, understanding instinctively that this needed to stay secret for now. Grandpa nodded approvingly. "Good girl. What's done is done, and it's no one's business but ours." 2 weeks passed in a blur of helping Grandma and Grandpa move to Pine Grove. The day they handed Dad the keys to their house, I felt my stomach twist. He had no idea those keys weren't really his to take. "This is wonderful," Linda gushed, already planning renovations in her head. "No more rent. We can finally have a real family home." They wasted no time moving us in. I watched silently as Linda walked through each room, her nose wrinkling at the vintage furniture and familiar decorations that held so many of my childhood memories. "This place needs a complete overhaul," she declared, running a finger along Grandma's antique sideboard. "And a deep clean. For now, the girls can share the blue room upstairs, it's the only one properly habitable." My heart sank. Share a room with Emma? At 16, she'd become even more impossible than before. As if on cue, Emma's shrill voice filled the house. "I am not sharing a room with her," she screamed, stamping her foot on Grandma's hardwood floors. "This isn't fair. I deserve the master bedroom. Why should I be stuck with her? Make her sleep in the closet or the basement or whatever. I don't care." I stood there, clutching a box of my belongings, as Emma's tantrum escalated. The familiar headache that came with her screaming started to pulse behind my eyes. "I hate this. I hate this house. I hate having to share anything with her." I'd learned long ago that there was no point in arguing. Without a word, I carried my box upstairs to the blue room, the same room where I used to sleep during weekend visits with Grandma and Grandpa. I set my laptop on the old desk by the window, placed a few books beside it, and left for my afternoon classes. The whole bus ride to campus, I tried to focus on my upcoming design project, but Emma's words kept echoing in my head. She'd gotten worse over the years, if that was possible. More entitled, more cruel, more calculating. When I returned that evening, the house was quiet. Dad and Linda's voices drifted up from the kitchen, but there was no sign of Emma. I climbed the stairs to our shared room, my footsteps silent on the carpet runner Grandma had installed years ago. The moment I opened the door, my world stopped. My laptop, my beautiful graduation gift from Grandma and Grandpa, my lifeline for my design work, lay shattered on the floor. The screen was cracked beyond repair, the case bent and broken. Emma sat on her bed, a satisfied smirk playing on her lips as she watched my face crumple. "What did you do?" My voice came out as a whisper, then rose to a shout. "What did you do?" "Oops," she said, examining her perfectly manicured nails. "Accidents happen. But go ahead, try telling them. We both know who they'll believe." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I did it on purpose, and there's nothing you can do about it." Something inside me snapped. All the years of being pushed aside, ignored, gaslight, it all came rushing up like a tidal wave. Before I knew what I was doing, I lunged at Emma, my vision blurred with tears of rage. "You spoiled, entitled little brat," I screamed, grabbing her shoulders. She shrieked, not her usual calculated cry for attention, but a genuine sound of surprise. We tumbled onto the floor, years of pent-up frustration finally exploding. "Help! She's crazy! Help!" Emma screamed, while I kept shouting about all the times she'd destroyed my things, lied about me, made my life miserable. Dad and Linda burst into the room, Dad pulling me off Emma, while Linda rushed to cradle her precious daughter. "Look!" I pointed at my shattered laptop, my voice breaking. "Look what she did. Grandma and Grandpa's graduation gift, she destroyed it on purpose." She admitted it. Emma's face transformed instantly, tears streaming down her cheeks as she clutched Linda. "It was an accident. I just bumped into the desk, I didn't mean to." And then she attacked me like a wild animal. "You evil, horrible girl," Linda shrieked at me, her face contorted with rage. "How dare you attack my daughter? John, I want her out of this house. Now. She's dangerous." I turned to Dad, desperately hoping he'd finally see through Emma's act. But his face was hard, closed off. "Pack your things," he said coldly. "And get out." The words hit me like physical blows. "Why?" I whispered, then found my voice. "Why do you always choose them? What happened to the dad who used to love me? Who promised Mom he'd take care of me?" His face reddened with anger. "Don't you dare bring your mother into this. You want to know the truth? You've been nothing but a burden since she died. A constant reminder of a past I wanted to forget. Linda and Emma are my real family now. You're just excess baggage we've been carrying around. You have 1 hour to leave my house." As he turned to leave, Emma's smug voice piped up. "I can finally have this room all to myself. I'm thinking pink walls, maybe a crystal chandelier." Linda joined in, already planning the renovation. "We'll get you new furniture, sweetheart. Make the space truly yours." Something shifted inside me at that moment. A lifetime of being pushed aside, of swallowing my words, of trying to be smaller, it all fell away. I stood up straighter, my voice clear and strong. "Actually, this isn't your house to renovate." They all turned to stare at me. "What are you talking about?" Linda snapped. With steady hands, I reached into my purse and pulled out the property documents Grandpa had given me. "This house belongs to me. Grandma and Grandpa transferred ownership to me before they moved to Pine Grove. If anyone's leaving, it's you three." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad snatched the papers from my hands, his face growing pale as he read. This can't be legal," Linda stuttered. "John, call your father right now." Dad's hands shook as he dialed Grandpa's number, putting it on speaker. "Dad, what is the meaning of this?" he demanded. Grandpa's voice was calm, almost amused. "I see Chloe's finally told you about the house. How could you do this to us?" Dad's voice cracked. "How could we do this?" Grandpa's voice turned hard. "How could you do what you've done to Chloe all these years? We watched you turn from a loving father into a spineless man who lets his wife and spoiled daughter walk all over him and abuse your firstborn child. Yes, we gave the house to Chloe. We knew this day would come, when you'd finally show your true colors." Dad started to respond with something angry, but Grandpa cut him off. "Choose your next words very carefully, son. One more disrespectful word, and you and your precious Emma lose your inheritance too. Your choice." I looked at the three shocked faces before me, my father, Linda, and Emma. They'd gone from righteous anger to stunned silence in the span of minutes. Now Linda was backpedaling fast. "Chloe, sweetie, we were just upset about the fight. We didn't really mean any of it. Of course we don't want you to leave. We were just joking." Her voice had that sickly sweet tone she used when trying to manipulate situations. "I have a really bad sense of humor," I replied, my voice steady. "So I'm going to take everything you said at face value. You have 1 week to find a new place and move out. I'll be staying at a hostel this week while you pack. I don't trust myself to be around any of you right now." "Chloe, please," Dad started, but I cut him off. 1 week. After that, I'm changing the locks." I walked out of my grandparents' house, no, my house, that night with my head held high, even as tears streamed down my face. The hostel bed was uncomfortable, but it was better than staying under the same roof with people who'd just shown me exactly who they were. True to my word, they were out within the week. On moving day, they made one last attempt at reconciliation. "We're so sorry," Dad said, standing in the doorway with the last box. "We realize now how horrible we've been." Linda nodded, frantically. "We never meant for things to go this far." Even Emma managed to look somewhat contrite, though she said nothing. I stood silently, watching them leave. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. 3 months later, I sat in Grandpa and Grandma's room at Pine Grove, telling them everything that had happened since moving day. The afternoon sun streamed through the window as Grandma poured tea into delicate cups. She'd insisted on bringing her good china to the nursing home. You did the right thing, standing up for yourself, Grandpa said, but his eyes were sad. Though I hope someday you can all find a way to be family again. Grandma reached over and squeezed my hand. But only when you're ready, dear. And only if they've truly changed. I nodded, telling them about my decision to rent out the house while I finished college. The rental income helped cover my expenses, and I'd found a small apartment closer to campus. I'd even been able to replace my laptop with the first month's rent. Dad called yesterday, I said quietly, stirring my tea. They're living in some rundown apartment complex on the edge of town. He apologized again, said they're struggling. And how do you feel about that? Grandma asked gently. Honestly? Part of me feels guilty, but another part thinks they needed to experience consequences for once. I set my cup down. I told him I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive them, or if I even want to try. That's fair, Grandpa said. Some wounds take a long time to heal. I'm graduating next semester with my degree in graphic design. I've already had some promising interviews with local agencies, and my portfolio is getting stronger every day. Sometimes I drive by the house and see the young family who's renting it now, their kids playing in the yard, lights glowing warmly in the windows at dusk. Maybe someday I'll move back in. Maybe someday I'll even be ready to have a relationship with Dad, Linda, and Emma again. But for now, I'm focused on building my own life, one where I don't have to make myself smaller to make room for anyone else. Growing up in the small town of Millbrook, our two-story house wasn't much to look at, but it was home. My parents, both teachers at the local school, made sure my sister Jane and I never went without, even if we weren't swimming in luxury. They had this way of stretching a teacher's salary to make everything work, and somehow, they always did. Jane was my big sister, my best friend, and everything I wasn't. While I preferred the quiet company of books and sketch pads, she was like a firecracker that lit up every room she entered. I can still picture us as kids, climbing the old oak tree in our backyard, making up wild stories about being explorers or royal princesses. Those were simpler times, before our paths started to diverge. As we grew older, the differences between us became more pronounced. Jane was everything I wasn't, outgoing, talented, and seemingly perfect in every way. She wrote poetry that made our English teacher cry, starred in every school play, and still found time to be a star player on the basketball team. Meanwhile, I was just there. The quiet one. The one who'd rather spend lunch break in the library with a book than in the cafeteria with crowds. Our parents never played favorites, at least not openly. They celebrated Jane's achievements with the same enthusiasm they showed for my decent grades and quiet accomplishments. But there was always this unspoken understanding that Jane was destined for greater things. When college acceptance letters started arriving, it wasn't a surprise that Jane got into Riverside University, one of the most prestigious schools in the state. I still remember the day she got her letter. Mom and Dad couldn't stop crying with joy. "Our baby's going to Riverside," Mom exclaimed, hugging Jane tight. "We always knew you were special." Dad was already on the phone, calling relatives. "Did you hear? Jane got into Riverside. Full academic scholarship." That was the beginning of the real divide between us. Not that we stopped loving each other, but life has a way of pulling people in different directions. Jane moved to the city, and I stayed behind, still in our childhood home, still trying to figure out who I was supposed to be. Little did I know then that our sisterly bond would be tested in ways I never could have imagined. That a single golden ring would shatter everything we'd built over the years, and force me to question everything I thought I knew about family, trust, and forgiveness. The phone calls home from Jane became a weekly ritual of success stories and achievements. Each time, I'd sit at the kitchen table, watching Mom's face light up as Jane shared her latest triumph at Riverside. "Did you hear?" Mom would gush to anyone who'd listen. Jane's research paper was published in the university's psychology journal. "She's only a sophomore." Dad would chime in, "and she's maintaining a 4.0 GPA while doing all this extra research. That's our girl." I spent those 2 years after high school working at the local diner, saving what I could for community college. When I finally enrolled at Millbrook Community College, my parents managed a smile and a "That's nice, dear." It wasn't Riverside, but it was something. "You know, Jane was on local TV again yesterday," Mom announced during dinner one evening. They interviewed her about her research on childhood development. She looked so professional. "That's great," I mumbled, pushing my peas around my plate. I worked hard at my studies, I really did. But somehow, getting a B+ in Introduction to Business didn't quite measure up to Jane's published papers and television appearances. My achievements were like candlelight next to her spotlight. After graduation, reality hit hard. While Jane was already establishing herself at Preston Medical Center as a rising star in their psychology department, I was dropping off resumes at local businesses with no callbacks. That's how I ended up working at Aunt Sarah's store as an assistant administrator. She took me on with that look of pity I was getting used to seeing. "It's just temporary," Aunt Sarah said, showing me around. "Until you find something more suitable for someone with a degree." Then came the news that changed everything. Jane called one Sunday evening, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Mom, Dad, I met someone," she squealed over speakerphone. "His name is Michael, and he's a lawyer at Blackwell and Associates. His family owns half the buildings downtown." I watched my parents exchange knowing looks of approval. Of course Jane would find someone as successful as she was. "He's taking me to Paris next month," Jane continued. "His family has an apartment there, can you believe it?" "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Mom exclaimed, while Dad beamed with pride. I sat there, in my old sweatpants, still living in my childhood bedroom, making minimum wage at my aunt's store. The contrast couldn't have been starker. Jane, the successful psychologist dating a wealthy lawyer, and me, the underachieving sister who couldn't seem to get her life started. "When do we get to meet him?" Mom asked eagerly. "Soon. He's taking me to that new French restaurant this weekend, but maybe next week we could come for dinner?" I excused myself from the kitchen before they could see the tears welling up in my eyes. It wasn't that I wasn't happy for Jane, I was. But each of her successes somehow felt like they were highlighting my failures. Every step forward she took seemed to push me 2 steps back in comparison. Holidays became a showcase of Jane's exciting life. She'd sweep into our parents' house like a celebrity, bringing stories of important clients, breakthrough therapy sessions, and glamorous dates with Michael. And then the CEO himself thanked me in front of the entire board, she'd say over Thanksgiving dinner, while I quietly passed the mashed potatoes. "Tell them about that conference in Boston, honey," Mom would prompt, beaming with pride. I'd sit there in my work clothes from the store, still living in my childhood bedroom, because minimum wage doesn't get you your own apartment in this economy. Even my aunt's employee discount couldn't help me save enough to move out. Then came the announcement we all knew was coming. It was during Christmas dinner when Jane stood up, Michael beside her, both grinning ear to ear. "We're getting married," she squealed, extending her left hand to reveal a stunning gold ring with a diamond that caught every light in the room. "It's been in my family for generations," Michael explained proudly. "My great-grandfather gave it to my great-grandmother in 1925. Mom burst into tears of joy, Dad opened his best bottle of wine, and I forced a smile while something heavy settled in my stomach. The next few months were a whirlwind of wedding preparations. Jane was at the house constantly, turning our modest home into wedding planning central. Every surface seemed covered with bridal magazines, color swatches, and guest lists. One Saturday in early spring, I had a rare day off. I was sprawled on my bed with my worn copy of Pride and Prejudice when I heard Jane and Mom in the garden below my window. "These roses will look perfect for the reception," Jane was saying. "We should plant more along this fence." "Careful with your ring, sweetie," Mom cautioned. "Those thorns can catch on anything." "You're right," Jane replied. "This glove keeps catching on it. I'll just put it here on the bench for now." I returned to my book, half listening to their chatter about flower arrangements and table settings. The afternoon sun was warm through my window, and I was just getting to my favorite part when I heard Mom's voice. We should get more fertilizer if we're planting all these new roses. Let's run to the garden center. Good idea, Jane agreed. Chris, we're going to the store. Be back soon. I mumbled an acknowledgement, too engrossed in my book to really pay attention. The house fell quiet except for the distant sound of birds in the garden. When they returned, the peace was shattered by Jane's panicked voice. Mom? Mom, the ring. It's gone. I looked up from my book at the commotion. Through my window, I could see Jane and Mom frantically searching around the wooden bench, pushing aside gardening tools and flower pots. It was right here. Jane's voice was getting higher with panic. I put it right here on the bench. Don't worry, honey, we'll find it, Mom assured her, but I could hear the worry in her voice. It has to be here somewhere. They searched until the sun started to set, combing through every inch of the garden, but the ring was nowhere to be found. That's when I first saw it in their eyes when they looked up at my window, that flicker of suspicion that would soon grow into something much darker. With shaking hands, Jane dialed Michael's number. I could hear his voice through the phone from across the room, growing louder with each word. What do you mean you lost it? His voice boomed through the speaker. That ring has been in my family for 4 generations. My great-grandmother wore that ring through 2 world wars. I'm so sorry, Jane sobbed. We'll find it, I promise. You'd better find it. The violence in his voice made me flinch. I don't care what it takes. That ring is irreplaceable. After she hung up, Jane turned to me, her face twisted with an expression I'd never seen before. You took it, didn't you? What? I felt like I'd been slapped. Jane, I was in my room the whole time. Exactly. You were the only one here. She was screaming now, mascara running down her cheeks. You've always been jealous of me. Mom stepped forward, her face hard. Christina, if you took the ring, you need to return it right now. I didn't take anything. My voice cracked. I swear. Then you won't mind if we search your room, Dad said, already heading for the stairs. I followed them up to my bedroom, watching helplessly as they tore it apart. They rifled through my drawers, emptied my jewelry box, flipped my mattress, and dumped out my purse. Books scattered across the floor, clothes were strewn everywhere, and even my private diary was read page by page. It has to be here somewhere, Jane muttered, throwing my sweaters onto the floor. Hours of searching turned into days, then a week. Each day, the accusations grew worse. Just admit it, Jane cornered me in the kitchen one morning. We all know you took it because you're jealous. You can't stand that I'm getting married while you can't even get a date. Jane, please. Look at you, she spat. 27 years old, living with Mom and Dad, working a pathetic job that Aunt Sarah gave you out of pity. You're a loser, Christina, and you couldn't stand to see me happy. Mom stood in the doorway, arms crossed. We're going to call the police if you don't return it. Go ahead, I shouted back, finally breaking. Call them. I have nothing to hide because I didn't take your precious ring. Each word was like a knife, cutting deeper than the last. The worst part wasn't the accusations or the threats, it was the look in their eyes. The absolute certainty that I was guilty, that I was capable of betraying my own sister out of jealousy and spite. Word spreads fast in a small town. Within days, my parents' version of events had reached every corner of Millbrook. At the grocery store, former neighbors avoided my gaze. At church, people who'd known me since childhood suddenly found reasons to sit in different pews. I was restocking shelves at my aunt's store when I heard her voice behind me. Christina, Aunt Sarah's tone made me freeze. We need to talk. In her small office, she didn't even offer me a seat. Your mother called me this morning. Aunt Sarah, please. She held up her hand. I took a chance on you when no one else would. And this is how you repay me? By stealing your sister's engagement ring? I didn't. Clean out your locker and turn in your keys, her voice was ice. I won't have a thief working in my store. The walk home felt like a death march. Maybe Mom and Dad would finally see how this was destroying my life. Maybe they'd realize I would never do this. I found them in the kitchen. "Aunt Sarah fired me," I said, my voice small. Mom didn't even look up from her coffee. "Pack your things." "What?" "You heard your mother," Dad said. "We want you out by tomorrow morning." The room started spinning. "You're kicking me out? Where am I supposed to go?" "Maybe you should have thought about that before you stole from your sister." Mom finally looked at me, her eyes harder than I'd ever seen them. "You brought shame to this family, Christina. I can't even look at my friends in the face anymore." "I'm your daughter," I whispered. "No daughter of mine would do what you've done." Her words cut like glass. "You have until morning." I stumbled upstairs in a daze, pulling my old gym bag from the closet. How do you pack up a life in one bag? Which pieces of yourself do you choose to take? Clothes went in first, enough for a week, maybe 2. One pair of sensible shoes. My laptop, wrapped in a sweater. Then came the harder choices. The books that had been my friends when I had none: Pride and Prejudice, Jane Eyre, Little Women. Stories of other women who had to find their way in a hostile world. Through it all, I couldn't stop crying. These walls had heard my first words, seen my first steps. This room had been my refuge through every storm of my life. Now it was just another place I wasn't welcome. My phone buzzed with messages from old friends. "I can't believe you would do this," and "How could you?" and "Don't contact me again." Sitting on my stripped bed, surrounded by the remnants of my life, I realized there was nothing left for me in Millbrook. Every bridge was burned, every door closed. Whatever I was going to become, it wouldn't be here. I had to leave. Not just this house, but this town, these memories, this life that had become a prison of accusations and distrust. Somewhere out there, I had to believe, was a place where I could start over. Where no one knew me as the sister who stole the ring, the daughter who betrayed her family, the girl who wasn't good enough. At 3 a.m., while staring at my phone's dwindling contact list, I remembered Rachel. We'd been close in college, before life pulled us in different directions. My fingers shook as I dialed her number, praying she still used it. "Chris?" Her voice was groggy with sleep. "What's wrong?" The whole story poured out of me between sobs. When I finished, there was a long pause. "I have a spare room," she said finally. "I'm in Portland now. It's not much, but it's yours if you want it." I checked my bank account, $342.17. Just enough for a one-way bus ticket to Oregon and maybe a meal or two. "When can you come?" Rachel asked. "Tomorrow," I whispered. "I have to leave tomorrow." The bus ride took 2 days. I spent most of it staring out the window, watching the familiar landscapes of my life fade into unknown territory. My gym bag sat on my lap like a life preserver, everything I now owned contained in one small space. Rachel was waiting at the station, just like she promised. She hugged me without hesitation, and for the first time in weeks, I felt human again. "The store where I work is hiring," she said as we drove to her apartment. "It's just retail, but it's something." I started the next day. The store manager took one look at my business degree and my desperate eyes and handed me a name tag. "You start on Register 3. I threw myself into the work like it was a lifeline. Every shift, every sale, every minute was 1 minute further from Millbrook and the wreckage I'd left behind. When other employees complained about long hours, I volunteered to stay longer. When they grumbled about difficult customers, I took them on with a smile. 3 months in, they made me a floor supervisor. 2 months after that, assistant manager. By the 8-month mark, I was managing my own department. "You're different from most people we promote," my district manager said during my review. "You have hunger." He was right. I was hungry, not just for success, but for vindication, for proof that I could be more than what my family thought I was. The day I signed the lease on my own apartment was the day I finally felt free. It was small, just a studio with a kitchenette, but it was mine. No one could tell me to leave, no one could search through my things, no one could question my right to be there. I changed my phone number that same day. Deleted every social media account. Erased every digital footprint that could lead back to Millbrook. Rachel thought I was being extreme, but she didn't argue. "They're still your family," she said once, carefully. "No," I replied, unpacking boxes in my new place. "Family believes in you. Family stands by you." They stopped being my family the day they chose not to believe me. At night, in my new bed, in my new life, I sometimes wondered about them. Was Jane married now? Did Mom still garden? Did Dad still read the paper every morning at the kitchen table? But wondering was dangerous. Wondering led to doubting, and doubting led to that dark place where I questioned everything, including myself. So I focused on work, on building something new, on becoming someone who couldn't be dismissed or discarded. Someone who didn't need anyone else's approval or belief. Someone who could survive being erased from her own family's story. Despite my best efforts to move forward, there were nights when curiosity got the better of me. On those nights, I'd ask Rachel to check Jane's social media accounts from her phone. She got married, Rachel told me one evening, scrolling through photos. Big white dress, church wedding. Your parents look happy in the pictures. I nodded, pretending the information didn't cut like a knife. A year later, she's pregnant, Rachel reported, showing me a photo of Jane cradling her belly, Michael's hand protectively placed over hers. She looked radiant. For years passed this way, me building my new life in Portland while getting occasional glimpses of my old one through Rachel's phone screen. For years of watching my family's life continue without me, through carefully curated photos and posts that never mentioned the missing daughter, the lost sister. Then came the call that changed everything. "Chris," Rachel's voice was breathless. "You need to see this." She sent me a screenshot of Jane's latest post. "To my sister Christina, I'm sorry. I was wrong. If anyone knows where she is, please help me find her. I need to make this right. Please share this post. Help me find my sister." I stared at the words until they blurred. "It's probably some kind of trick," I said finally. "I don't think so," Rachel replied softly. "Look at the comments. Your parents are there too, begging you to contact them." My hands shook as I read their comments. "Mom, please come home, sweetheart. We need to talk to you. Dad, we made a terrible mistake. Please give us a chance." After 4 years of silence, their words seemed surreal. But something in their desperation felt genuine. I called the old house number, half expecting it to be disconnected. Mom answered on the first ring. "Hello?" Her voice hadn't changed. "It's me," I said quietly. The sharp intake of breath, then, "Christina? Oh God, Christina." I could hear her crying, calling for Dad. Their voices tumbled over each other. "Please come home. We need to see you. There's something you need to know." "I can come next weekend," I heard myself say. The drive back to Millbrook was the longest of my life. Each mile marker brought back memories I'd tried so hard to bury. The town looked exactly the same, as if it had been frozen in time while I'd been away. Jane's car was in the driveway when I arrived. My heart hammered against my ribs as I walked up the familiar path to the front door. They were all waiting in the living room, Mom, Dad, and Jane. 4 years had changed them too. Mom's hair was grayer, Dad looked smaller somehow, and Jane was holding a sleeping baby about 4 years old on her lap. "We found it," Mom said, her voice breaking. "The ring. We found it." Dad stepped forward. "We were replanting the roses last week, and there it was, tangled in the roots." "Right where?" "Right where I knocked it off the bench that day," Jane finished, tears streaming down her face. "The ring fell, and then we covered it with soil while planting. It's been there all this time, growing deeper with the roses." The revelation broke something in all of us. Suddenly, the living room was filled with raw, uncontrolled sobbing. Mom collapsed into Dad's arms, her whole body shaking. Dad's quiet composure finally cracked as tears streamed down his weathered face. Jane sank to her knees, her cries waking her sleeping son. And I, after 4 years of holding everything inside, of being strong, of surviving, I finally let go. The tears came in waves, years of pain and loneliness pouring out in gut-wrenching sobs. "I'm so sorry, Chris," Jane choked out between gasps. "I was horrible to you. Cruel. Unforgivable. I let my fear and Michael's anger cloud my judgment. I chose to believe the worst about my own sister." Mom reached for my hand, but stopped short, uncertain. "We failed you as parents," she whispered through her tears. "We should have believed in you, protected you. Instead, we..." She couldn't finish. "Please," Jane pleaded, "tell us how to make this right. I'll do anything. We all will." I looked at them, these people who had once been my whole world, then my worst nightmare, and now I wasn't sure what they were. "I can't just pretend the last 4 years didn't happen," I said finally, wiping my eyes. "You didn't just accuse me, you condemned me. Turned the whole town against me. Threw me out with nothing but a gym bag and no place to go. What if..." Mom hesitated, then continued, "What if we saw someone? A family therapist? Someone who could help us rebuild what we broke." "Once a month," Dad added quickly, his voice still thick with emotion. "As long as it takes." I looked at the little boy on the couch, my nephew, I realized with a start. He had Jane's nose and Michael's dark hair. 4 years of his life had passed without an aunt. "I'm not moving back to Millbrook," I said firmly. "I have a life in Portland now. A good job. Friends who stood by me when no one else would." "We understand," Jane said. "We don't deserve to have you back in our lives. But if you're willing to try, even a little." It took 3 months before I agreed to my first holiday visit, Thanksgiving. I brought Rachel with me for support. The dinner was awkward, full of careful conversations and avoided topics, but it was a start. Dr. Martinez, our family therapist, helps us navigate the harder conversations. In her office, we talk about trust and betrayal, about the weight of expectations and the poison of assumptions. Sometimes we leave her sessions angry or hurt, old wounds reopened. But slowly, carefully, we're learning to hear each other. Jane's son, my nephew Tommy, is the easiest part. 4-year-olds don't carry grudges or remember family sins. To him, I'm just Aunt Chris, who brings him books from Portland and teaches him to draw. His innocent love is like a bridge between who we were and who we might become. The roses still bloom in Mom's garden, including the ones that grew around that ring for 4 years. Sometimes I look at them and think about how truth, like a ring in the earth, can get buried under layers of assumptions and accusations. But truth, like those roses, finds its way to the surface eventually. I'm not the same person who left Millbrook with a gym bag and a broken heart. They're not the same people who cast me out. We're all learning that healing, like gardening, takes time, patience, and constant care. Some days are harder than others, but we keep trying.